So why does sprinting help your endurance, but endurance training or something at a lower intensity doesn't help your sprinting? To make this point, I'm going to use two examples that I think are, when you look at it this way, it's very obvious. But I think common training, for whatever reason, we do things in the health and fitness, and especially in when we train people in ways that are old ideas that we've just kind of done, and it's just what we've always done, so we kind of continue it along. And I look at that as unnecessary and really unscientific, and a lot of the fitness industry is unscientific. But what's interesting is we can still get results, and we're also creatures of habit, so we continually these things whether or not the actual science points to this achieving the results that we're after. So the two examples that I'm going to make when it comes to sprinting are, if I was someone, and when I say sprinting, what I'm really talking about is high effort. Well, a sprint is a sprint because you're using every ounce of energy to move as fast as possible. And I can apply that sprint concept to weightlifting, whether it be my biceps, all right? I'm doing as many repetitions, or as a max effort lift, I'm using as much force as I can. I'm using as many muscles as I can to do the activity at the highest level. So I'm using, not only am I using my slow twitch fibers, but I'm using all of my fast twitch fibers. That's what defines a sprint or something that is high effort. So if I look at something that is less than high effort, let's just take someone who jogs for 10 miles. And I say to that person, they're used to jogging 10 miles. And I say to that person, hey, let's go walk 20 miles. They'd be like, okay, no problem. I'm used to jogging. I'm used to doing something that's at a higher intensity for less duration, but something that's a little bit longer. It's not going to be that big of a problem because I'm so used to doing something at a higher intensity. That's like saying to someone, if I'm used to sprinting, okay, all out sprinting, using more effort, I'm going to be able to do something like a jog better. And the opposite is not true. If I said, hey, you're used to walking 20 miles, let's go run 10 miles, it's a whole new ballgame because you're calling on so many more muscle fibers, and it's a much greater challenge. And the idea that we take into fitness is, well, we need to do, and we need to have these cardio bases, or we need to have this muscular endurance base so that I can perform at a higher intensity level better. But again, when I switch that around, it shows that I don't. I can walk the 20 miles no problem because I'm used to doing the 10 mile of a higher intensity jog or run. And the same thing applies to a full out sprint. If I really want to maximize my conditioning, and this goes down to your energy pathways as well, where the way that your energy comes into your system, the way that you truly can overload it and make your mitochondria work harder is through maximal effort. That's the best way you're going to do it. So they've done things like the Tabata method, where you're working at 110% of your capacity. You're pushing it harder than you've ever done before, and you're doing it for 20 seconds. And they've shown that this method, you do that 10 seconds on, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and you do that repeatedly for eight rounds, and it's only 4 minutes, but that workout of 4 minutes will give you tremendous endurance results. Where, like I was saying, if I just work on something that is a low intensity, because it doesn't overload my cardio system or my energy pathway system, like I said, with your mitochondria, it's not going to translate to optimal. Can I still get results? Yes, of course. But what I'm saying is in regard to time efficiency, and this is why I think a lot of the time when we do these old tried and true ways of training, we're just wasting our time. And maybe it's a way for some people to not have burnout when it comes to it. And what I would say in regard to burnout is just take more time off. I think if we're working at a maximal capacity, You can't do that all the time. And taking time off is not that big of a deal, but for whatever reason, we need to have a schedule Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We got to do these things. And I think we end up wasting a lot of time when we could just be working on the things that are the most effective. Now, some people enjoy doing things that are nonsensical just to do something, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when it comes to actually getting results, what really drives results. So if I can do 20-second interval sprints to help me with endurance, but you can see now how if I take things and I change the level, right, it makes sense. If I'm used to jogging 10 miles, I can walk almost forever because it's at a lower intensity. So if I translate that out, if I want to get better at running 10 miles, doing hard sprints is going to translate directly into that, whether that be my muscles, because I'm again using all of those muscle fibers that are involved in a jog, and I'm maximally stimulating them. And that's going to help me translate into what I do on that jog. And another great example of this is people who train maximally and then do an endurance event, and they don't train endurance, but they have some of the best endurance, and it doesn't even seem like they would have the endurance. And it makes no sense because they don't train that way, is the NFL Combine. When you look at these NFL prospects that are doing the Combine bench press, they don't train. They might practice that skill of doing the 225 bench press a bunch of times. They might practice it a few times before they go into actually doing it for the Combine, but they don't train like that. That's not something that they've been training over and over and over again. What they do is they train maximally. They train heavy. They go hard in the gym, lifting sometimes 1 rep maximums, right? But a lot of times they're strength focused, which is high weight, all right, low repetitions, and they're focused on building muscle. They're not focused on endurance, but yet they sit down at the Combine and they pump out 50 repetitions of 225, which would be considered muscular endurance. And so when you look at it, it's the same sprint concept. If I am working on maximally stimulating my muscle fibers, when I sit down to do something that was quote unquote an endurance event, yeah, maybe I might need to practice it because it's a little bit, I have to focus on my breathing differently. It's the same thing if I was going to do sprints or if I was going to do like a 10-mile jog. I would want to familiarize myself with that different, it's because it is a different thing. I'm going to breathe different. I'm going to learn how to pace myself, the way that I move my feet. It's different, but it's very similar. Same thing with if I'm used to maximally bench pressing, and then I go and I want to do as many repetitions as possible with a lighter weight. I'd go from a heavier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 repetition maximum down to a, like I said, 20, 30, 40, 50. Some of these guys can bang out 50 repetitions of this at a lighter weight. Those same things apply. I might breathe differently. I might have to do the repetitions differently. So you're going to want to practice. But what translates better? Doing one thing at a not maximal effort is not going to translate over into the maximal, but the maximal will translate over into the submaximal. And it's an easy example to think about when you think about the NFL Combine, but let's take a practical example. Let's just say you can bench press 500 pounds and I can only bench press 300 pounds. Which one of us is going to be able to bench press 100 pounds? Both of us, it's going to be submaximal, but for you, 100 pounds is 1/5 of what you're used to lifting, and for me, it's 1/3. Who's going to be able to bench press 100 pounds more repetitions if we were going to do an endurance event? It's obvious, right? When you make the numbers bigger, it's obvious that the person who can lift more is going to be able to move that weight around like it's a toothpick. Versus me, it's 1/3. It's a lot more challenging. It's still light, but it's going to be a lot more challenging for me. So what does that mean for training? Muscular endurance doesn't really play that big of a factor unless if I've got the muscular strength to go along with it, or if it's a specific event that I'm doing, of course, that I want to practice that. So like power training, I made a video on power training. A lot of what the benefits that we're getting are from the strength adaptations. And power training is like a form of a sprint. You're maximally moving your body. There is a more effective, safer way of doing that through strength training. If you're doing it correctly, you can stimulate all those muscle fibers just like you would, and you don't have to put yourself in these technical positions like an Olympic lift or a kettlebell spooning or whatever it might be that these power training modalities demand of you. You can do that in a much easier, safer way on a machine. As long as you push, you're going to get all those muscle fibers, and that strength is going to translate over into power when I do my skill of whatever activity it might be. And the same thing applies to if I maximally stimulate my muscle fibers, whether that be in a sprint or whether that be in a bench press or that be in a leg press, if I then use my muscles in a sub-maximal way, that strength is going to translate over into that muscular endurance or that stamina, like you would see someone that went from 10-mile jogging to just walking. Like I said, they could walk 20, 30 miles because they're used to doing something that is a lot more challenging, and that translates over into less challenging. Whereas if you're used to walking a really long distance or jogging, it's not going to translate over into that sprint or that higher intensity because you're not used to calling upon all of those muscle fibers with such a high demand. So when it comes to training, I look at maximal training, whether that be interval training, and some people can't. Look, this the bottom line is some people can't sprint. Some people can't, do the Tabata method on an air bike. They just can't move their body like that, whether it be injury or whether that be some, heart issue. But I would say is if you can, those are the ways that you want to train. In the weight room, you want to train maximally, safely, but maximally. Same thing with sprinting. It's more challenging, it's more technical, but the concept is what I'm trying to get across today is that if I push and I'm calling upon all of my muscle fibers, even if it's in a short duration, if I do that, I am going to then be much more prepared to do something at a sub-maximal level. So for me, training comes down to effort and intensity, and it doesn't matter what I do. If I do that, whether it's boxing, right? I've been working on kickboxing and boxing. If I do that and I just putter around, it doesn't help me as much as if I go all out, all in when I do my effort. And slowly over time, that way of my body responding to that maximal stimulation is going to translate into, if I do just want to, flick jabs out, I can do that for a lot longer period of time because I have challenged my entire system, right? Or that entire muscle group that's involved in whatever activity that I'm doing. So when I think about training, I think about training the whole body, and that's why you want to maximally stimulate those things. But when it comes to those different activities, the muscular strength, the strength that I have through doing things at a maximal effort is going to translate tremendously over into any of those other sub-maximal efforts, whether that be endurance, all right, or whether that be bench pressing, for repetitions or doing push-ups or whatever it might be. So, anyways, that's why sprinting helps endurance, but endurance training doesn't help your sprinting.